I have, I'm that corny guy that still believes in the service aspect of our motto. It's unfortunate that in a lot of places the protection piece comes first. If I had my way, we would lock in on the service aspect and place greater emphasis on that. And the reason for that is because, for me, and I tell this to my staff, I tell this to prospective hires, no matter what position they're going to hold, but particularly for sworn law enforcement. If it's not a privilege for you to put this uniform on and go out and be of service to other people, A, you're not going to do as well at this job as you can, and B, you're not going to have any coping mechanisms to stave off the cynicism that are a natural part of doing this job, because unfortunately we get to see the seedier side of humanity more often than well, as a matter of course. Let's just face it. Depending on where you work, it's the volume is a lot higher. So I ask prospective employees, at least the ones I have some control over hiring, a couple of very simple questions. If I don't get the answers I want, they're no longer in consideration. And some people may think it's harsh, but my experience has taught me that if they don't possess these very simple characteristics or traits, they're not doing this job for the right reason. And one, I ask them, why do you want to be a police officer? And if I hear, which I have, I've heard everything under the sun. Because my dad was, because my uncle is, because it's a good job, because I can make a decent living. That's wonderful. Those are all very tender notions, but you're far. There's a huge gap that's still there. The answer I'm looking for is to be of service to other people. It's a simple proposition for me. And then I ask them what they've done in furtherance of that. And so if they haven't actually gone and taken the time to go and gauge the culture of a particular organization, the job's the same everywhere pretty much, but every police department has its own culture and or identity. It just does, for a variety of reasons. And so if they haven't taken the time to do that, I'm questioning their motivation for wanting to get in what I think is the most noble profession there is. And the last question I ask them carries the most weight, and it's if they've ever done any volunteer work. And you'd be surprised at how many people say no. But if the answer is no to that one, I don't want any parts of them. Because if they have never done something for someone else without being compensated for it, how are they going to withstand the scrutiny and all of the other negative things that come with this job? You have to have some coping mechanisms built in already, or this job can destroy you in that respect. And then, of course, that affects your attitude and your performance and how you interact with the public. So those things are not negotiable to me. Stripping other human beings of their dignity, no matter where they come from, what they look like, how much or how little money they have or influence or status, that one's never acceptable. And so this is the actual conversation I have with prospective hires. Fewer things will get them cross with me than stripping human beings of their dignity or being capricious about the way they provide service or what levels. I don't have a lot of time for that, for obvious reasons. Being a man of color, historically, communities of color, have constantly been in conflict, with white police officers and/or departments. So we're not doing that here on my watch. Everybody gets the same level of service and respect simply because they're human beings. We certainly have a demographic that force us to change our thinking on that because they don't want any parts of it, and those would be the bad guys. And so we have an app for that too. That's when we use the other tools that we're given throughout training. So we have something to address that. But we always start from a place of respect for humanity. I wanted to. It was the night before. It was the day I was appointed, and that next day was my first opportunity to speak to my entire staff as a group, and I wanted to figure out a way to explain to them as succinctly as I could what I expected of them and what they could expect of me, without having to go into a long, drawn-out dissertation, if you will. And so I often sleep on things like that. And I keep a pad and a pen next to my bed because I'm an idea man. And sometimes they work, right? And so they come to me sometimes while I'm sleeping, and I'll get up and scribble it down. And if it makes sense to me in the morning, then we go with it. And this was one of those. I rocked myself to sleep, if you will, asking myself the question, how can I best get across to my new staff here, these people who don't know me from a can of paint, what I expect from them and what they can expect from me, and what my vision and values are for this organization, for this city, for this region. And the wheel of integrity came to me. And so I wrote that down, and in the morning it still made sense to me. It was the simplicity of it. Imagine a wheel with 5 spokes, each one representing a value. And they are accountability, transparency, respect, honesty, and humility. And so the idea behind that is that whenever you're interacting with anyone, whether it's a victim, whether it's a witness, a suspect, a coworker, a colleague, a supervisor, a civilian employee, it doesn't really matter. If any of those are missing, then your wheel is not going to roll the way it was intended. So stop, check yourself, and insert the missing value there. And I think if we can do that consistently, all of us humans here on this planet would get along with one another a lot better. It seems a bit pie in the sky, but for me it is critical for what we do, because a lot of what we do involves us interacting with people. It's not like TV, it's not like CSI where they get everything solved in 43 minutes without the commercials. We're dealing with actual human beings in a variety of conditions. Some good, some bad, some just absolutely horrifying. And they call us when they need help. And so I tell my staff, and I remind them all the time, and I remind myself, when people call us, they have submitted. It doesn't matter how severe we think the issue is or how trivial it may appear. They've submitted and said, I need help. And, the way I was raised was you don't kick somebody in the gut when they ask you for help. You give them what you can. You give them everything you have. And if you want to be a public servant in this fine profession and you don't have that attitude, then all kinds of things can go sideways. Yeah. Well, I have a variety of tools I can use on the lower end of the continuum. It could be a simple conversation, pointing out to them or helping them or inviting them, if you will, to recognize, which of the 5 values we're missing, and sometimes it's more than one. On the more significant, if you will, end of the continuum, it could be termination. And so everything in between, whether it's counseling or coaching, whatever you want to call it. We've also implemented a fair and impartial policing training module that we do every year here at St. Cloud during our in-service. And I think mostly it's by example, and not the problem, I think, that happens too much is a lot of people don't want to be they don't want to be considered confrontational. And so, unfortunately, usually to them, the best way not to be is to say or do nothing. And then those kinds of issues are exacerbated. I believe in managing people where they are. I don't believe in sending problem employees to other units or divisions or other parts of the organization. We're going to manage them right where they are. They're going to know in no uncertain terms that there's only one of us in charge, and it's not them. And I can do that without being dictatorial. But what it does take, particularly when you're dealing with a house full of type A personalities, present company included, it takes some courage. I wish I could remember the admiral who uttered this quote. I saw it when I was taking a tour of Annapolis at the U.S. Naval Academy, and it was a simple quote, and it said, "To lead is to live dangerously." End of quote. And I wish I could remember the admiral's name who uttered it, because again, it's the simplicity. And so you cannot wallow in fear in being in a leadership position, because to me anyway, that's going to be cause for you to let things go that you shouldn't. And I see it far too often in this profession. And so I don't let stuff go. And sometimes it's irritating to my staff, but if you let it go, the smaller things, they become catastrophes later. And so for me here, and since I've been an administrator, it's a mindset that I follow because it's worked for me. It's helped me effectively manage people, even the ones who get a little bit off the rails and off the tracks. We also have employee assistance programs and a myriad of other mechanisms we can use depending on how egregious the officer's behavior, is that we utilize. So I'm a firm believer in that stuff. Okay. Most importantly, and your question is more important as we await the grand jury verdict out of Missouri, which is imminent. It's coming in the next few days or weeks at the most. And it's something I've said it since the outset. We weren't there, so we don't know what happened. From my money, and in my opinion, that was the flashpoint. Ferguson, it wouldn't shock me if you went back for any number of years, you could see the city of Ferguson and a lot of others like it building up to that unfortunate incident. But we don't know what happened because we weren't there. And mass media didn't do that incident a service. It did it a disservice because it got people whipped into a frenzy without the facts. And see, they don't have to get it right, and that's the unfortunate part. And when it was no longer profitable for them, they left and moved on to the next story. And that's a shame. So what I want people to know about law enforcement is that the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority of men and women out there working and serving have pure hearts. They believe in being of service. They believe in helping other people. They know that sometimes this job is thankless, but 99.9% of the time it's one of the most rewarding careers you could have. And that's also another reason why I ask prospective candidates why if they volunteer, because you have to have something to disengage from this job. You need a mechanism so that you can disengage from this job and go do something else, lest you become more and more cynical the longer you're doing this. So I want people to know that there are real people behind these uniforms who have to confront real issues just like they do. Whether it involves us or our families or our extended families or our friends, there are people. We're not droids. real people who have to deal with a variety of human conditions as well. However, again, and I stress this to my staff, you don't get to have a bad day. We don't ever. It's not fair to the public. So I've installed emotional dumpsters around the perimeter of this building. They're invisible, and the direction to the staff is simple. Leave all your garbage in there before you cross the threshold. And if you like, you can extract it on your way back home or wherever you're going after work. But while you're here, the public gets your very best. We don't get to have a bad day. Someone who calls for service and I or another officer answers that call doesn't care that I had an argument with my wife, or my teenage son or whatever. That's not their problem. And so we don't get to introduce our problems, and we need to do a better job, of that more consistently. In terms of community policing, it has to be something that permeates the entire agency. It can't be left to a handful of people. Everybody has to have that mindset. And so obviously the challenge is, how do you get 100 or 200 different people, mostly all type A's, no matter what kind of organization you're in, on the same page at the same time all the time? And so it's our job to kind of orchestrate that as leaders and make sure that we've got most of them most of the time. And so that's all right. It's another challenge of being in a leadership position, and it's a moving target. And so it's one of those things that you work to perfect all the time. Our community here is engaged in St. Cloud, so it's not difficult for me at all. There are dozens of groups that advocate for all kinds of things and people, and I love it. This is one of those places that I think could be a model, because a lot of places talk about being, community oriented, having an engaged community. St. Cloud is far and above any place I've ever been, and I'm not exacerbating that at all. I'm not exaggerating.
I know you guys do. You guys have Skyla.
We do.
And you also have a partnership with, is it the Boys and Girls Clubs?
We have
officers.
We do. I reinstituted the PAL program, which runs throughout the summer, to provide programming for kids based on their age groups, and meals, which is a huge problem. When school's out, some kids don't eat. And so that's one of the major components of our program. We have Bigs in Blue with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, where I've authorized my officers to mentor on duty through a partnership, a collaboration with Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We have our Skyla Camp, which is our St. Cloud Youth Leadership Academy for at-risk. My officers also participate as part of the staff when we take them to Camp Ripley for the week-long portion that covers everything from table etiquette to conflict resolution. And then we bring them back and mentor them until they graduate high school. The ones that don't move, this is an at-risk demographic, and consequently they're transient. The first year we did it, 20% of the kids we took had left our immediate area in our school district within a week of us returning home, and we don't know where they are. I mean, their families moved to other jurisdictions, to other cities, to other states. We haven't seen and heard from them since. So that's just a few of our youth initiatives, and we have them that cover the gamut, so that we can engage our neighborhood associations, our downtown business association, our chamber of commerce. We have a myriad of mechanisms and programs that we use to stay engaged with the St. Cloud community. Well, to me as a police officer, if you see someone in need, you try and address that need. And you try to take a comprehensive approach to solving any problem. And so knowing that the kids on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale live in homes that struggle to put 3 meals a day on the table consistently. I don't know how you could design a program for that particular group of kids and not include a very important but very basic for those of us who are fortunate enough to have the resources to eat 3 square meals a day. How do you leave that one out? And that's our reasoning. That's the approach we take to problem solving and to programming. We want to engage these young people. We want to build better citizens through youth mentoring, and it's hard to not only to reach any human being, but it's hard for them to concentrate and absorb and take anything positive out of anything if they're hungry. And so that's why that is a very important component for that particular program. And the unfortunate part is we only run it for a portion of the summer. I think we run it for 10 weeks, which is most of the summer. We want their attention because we are trying to give them some tools, and you motivate young people differently, because their brains are not fully developed. Everybody knows about the frontal lobe, but you don't hear a lot about the temporal lobe, which is where their emotions come from, and they learn to feel, which is why kids who live in violence all day long are easily desensitized because they don't get an opportunity to develop that part. And so for me, again, how can I get their attention and impart any of the wisdom that we've been fortunate enough to acquire if their stomachs are growling? They're not hearing you. So, besides, we want them to see that we are human beings too. And we want most of their contacts with us to be positive. And it goes a long way down the line as those kids grow up. You've already established rapport with them. So when they get to those forks in the road, and it's time for them to start making choices, about which way they're going to go, they're not easily swayed by some of the other ne'er-do-wells who may not have as much affection for us, if you will. Those kids already know us in a different way.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Any last statements? Any closing statements you want to make?
It sounds corny, it sounds cliche, but it's a privilege. And until we start treating it that way across the nation, we're still going to have conflict and unnecessary conflict. It's one of my sincere hopes, and I don't know all of the answers. You have to change people's hearts and minds, unfortunately, because they bring their biases. They bring their upbringing, they bring their teachings with them to this profession. But this is one where really it's very dangerous when you don't view people in an equitable way. So for me, anybody who's listening who sees this, I need for them to understand just how much power we really have as police officers because we live in a free society. And we're free to move about, right? Wherever our wallet and our wit will take us, unless somebody dressed like me in any one of these 50 great states and all of the jurisdictions, that's make this country up, isn't satisfied. I can detain you for a little while until I'm satisfied. That should be treated with reverence. That's very powerful when you can restrict people's movement, particularly people in a free society. The Cold War is over. This isn't Eastern, Europe or other Eastern Bloc countries during that time. You don't need papers. Our borders are open. And so I want everybody in this discipline to, for at least for those that may or may not have a firm grip on that, to maybe start using that lens when they think about, you know, what it is we're charged to do, and the many tools and the extraordinary amount of power we're given in order to, you know, carry out our primary mission, which is public safety. And it doesn't differentiate. I've never seen it say this public deserves to be more safe than that public. It simply says public safety, which to me means everybody.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.